Okay, good morning. Today's daf is 27, and we begin the very last word of 26b, Itmar. Itmar was said. Eid Zomim. Um, an Eid Zomim is disqualified from being a witness in the future. Just to remind you, an Eid Zomim is a particular kind of witness disqualification, or when a witness is tripped up by another pair of witnesses saying, you testified such and such, but you couldn't have witnessed it because you were with us somewhere else at the same time. That's a particular kind of um, contradictory testimony. It doesn't directly challenge the event in question, but it challenges the witnesses' claim that they were witnesses, that they were able to be witnesses to this. And in that case, the Torah says, "Sisam lo kasher zamam lasos liachiv." Then the second pair of witnesses is believed to disqualify the first set, and the first set is punished with whatever it is that they were trying to make the defendant liable with. That's the punishment that they get. So Eid Zomim. When does he become postulators? When does he become a disqualified from being a witness in future cases? We go retroactively. So in other words, we look back in time to um, to the point where he gave his testimony in the case where he was found to be an Eid Zomim. So in other words, it could take time, right? You could on Monday I could give my testimony, and on Thursday I'm found to be an Eid Zomim. So when do I start being disqualified from being a witness? So Abai says, go look back to Monday. Rav Amar Mikan Laboni. So Rava says, no, just from Thursday, from the moment that I become an Eid Zomim, that I'm found guilty of that. That's when I'm no longer qualified to be a witness. Why does the Bible say go look back retroactively? Like that's like, why is he becoming disqualified? He's unreliable, right? No, he's unreliable, but worse, he's a felon, right? So from the moment that he committed that crime, that's when he becomes a in unqualified to be a witness. But Torah Amra al Tashas Yad Chaim Rasha. Torah says, don't join hands with a wicked person. Al Tashas Rasha aid. And the we understand that to mean don't let a wicked person be a witness. Rava, because the continuation of the pasuk is Al Tasha Shel Chaim Rasha Lios Eid Hamas, to be a felonious witness. Um, so we understand, don't make a wicked person, don't accept him as a witness. Rava Mikan Laboni. So Rava says no, only from the time that that he is found to be an Eid Zamim. We don't look back. Eid Zamim Chidushu, because. Um, because the whole idea of Eid Zomim, as I alluded to earlier, is like it's different than the usual case of Hakasha, of two sets of witnesses, with different versions of events, right, or contradicting each other, right? In that case, you would say, well, you've got witnesses, set A says this, set B says that, so they'll cancel each other out. We won't believe either of them. But in the case of Eid Zomim, we always believe the latter party, or the latter witnesses, right? Like, why should you believe the second pair of witnesses? Maybe they're lying, right? But no, we do. And the Torah, so Rava calls it a chidush. That's something that the Torah says, is outside the usual bounds of the rules. My chazis is samachahane smachane, because why would you rely on the latter witnesses? You could rely on the first witnesses, right? En lecha bo ela mishas chidusha ve'elach. So because this isn't logical, right? It doesn't follow the system. So therefore, we're not going to look back. We're only going to say, okay, now you've been declared to be an Eid Zomim. We actually don't necessarily think that you're lying, but the Torah says you're an Eid Zomim. So from now on, you're not going to be a valid witness. Ikodam, right? Or others explain. Rava Nami Kabayis Sphirle. Rava also thinks that you look back. My Tom Kamer Mikan Lava. So why does he say only from now, from the time that they were convicted of being Zomimim? Why do we say that? That's when um, that's when we start not accepting them as witnesses. Because what happens if they were eight witnesses in the interim period between the time they gave their testimony and were found to be zomim, and we relied on that testimony until now, and now we're canceling it, right? So you're going to have it's going to disrupt the system. So for that reason, really, we should disqualify them looking backwards. But it's not practical to look backwards. It doesn't work well for us to look backwards and disqualify testimony that he might have already given and had accepted. Therefore, we say, okay, we're only going to start now that they've been found to be zomim. Now we're going to say they're no longer qualified witnesses. Maybe now. So what's the difference between the two views of Rava? Trey B'chad, where you have two sets of witnesses testifying against one set of witnesses. So you have witness A and witness B, right? And then C and D say that A was with us at the time, he can't be a witness, and E and F say that B was with us at the time, and he couldn't be telling the truth. Um, so 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 here you don't have the idea that well, rely on these rather than those. Here it's two against one in each case, right? Where A is being contradicted by two witnesses and B is being contradicted by two witnesses, then we would believe them, right? That's not a chidush, right? And that would go along with our usual rules of jurisprudence. So in that case, Rava, according to the first explanation, Rava would agree with Abaye. But according to the second explanation, that it makes no difference how many witnesses are contradicting how many witnesses. We accepted the testimony until now, therefore we can't look back because it would be disruptive. Inami, or another case where there would be a difference, the paslinhu begazlanusa, when the second set of witnesses are disqualifying the first set by saying that, oh, you couldn't have given you couldn't have witnessed what you said you witnessed because we saw you robbing a jewelry store at that time. Um, so um, so then we understand why the so in other words, they're not coming to disqualify the witness. They're coming to say, we saw you rob a jewelry store. So in that case, um, we would not apply um, so the original witness can't use their witness status to deny the charges because now they're the plaintiffs, the defendants, not the witnesses. Therefore, their testimony should be valid, and so it's a chiddush that they're not believed, and that would be the difference. Okay. Rimi said, Rav Papi uvda kavasi de Rava. Rav Papi ruled in a case like Rava. In other words, that you don't look back. It's only from the time they become zomim that they're pasaledus. Mar bar Rav Ashi Amar, hilchos kavasi Abaye. But Mar says, no, the halacha is like Abaye that you do look back. Hilchos kavasi Abaye be al kagam. And this is one of the 6 cases in Shas where we rule like Abaye in his disputes with Rava. In all other cases, we rule like Rava, and this is the ayin of Ya'al Kagam, the Eid Zomim. So if you want to look at Rashi, just for a brief summary of what is Ya'al Kagam, actually, on one of them there's a machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos, but anyway, we'll look at Rashi. Ya'al Kagam, Yehu Shalomidas be'elim tzios, Yehu Shalomidas, where do we think that someone who's lost an object, if he's like we usually have a period of after 30 days, let's say we assume that he's given up, but what if he doesn't know that he lost it? So is there a 30-day period or not? So I can't remember, to be honest, which one is what Rav and which is Abaye. Ezomim hacha. And then the lamed, the ayin is ezomim. The lamed is lechi homed me'elav. Shlonim through. Yes, this has to do with a board that stands by itself. Is that considered a building? Kiddushin shlonim shaluvia. Beish makadesh. The kuf is is kiddushin, is marriage that cannot be consummated. Does that count? Ginoi das. Honestly, I can't remember what that one is. And Mumar ochel nevelos lahachis. And I, I didn't look these up, so I don't remember what they all are. But feel free. Mumar ochel nevelos l'te'avon divrei kol pasol. This is the one here, right? A mumar, someone who is an apostate, and he eats nevela, eats non-kosher meat, l'te'avon, because he wants to. Like he's hungry. He likes to eat likes to eat that kind of meat, or maybe it's cheaper and he doesn't have the money. So it's because he wants the meat, not because he wants to throw off the yoke of Torah. So divrei kol pasul. Everybody agrees that he can't be an aid. Lahachis, but if he's doing it, to show that that he's not religious. Abaye Amar pasul, Rav Amar kasher. Abaye says he is not a good witness, and Rava says he can be a good witness. Abaye Amar pasul. Why does Abaye say he's no good? The Havalei Rasha, because he is, in the end of the day, he's doing an avera. He's sinning. Rahman Amar Tashas Al Tashas Rasha Eid. We saw before. We have a pasuk that indicates don't let a wicked person, a sinner, be a witness. Rav Amar Kasher. Why does Rava say that he's still good as a witness? Rasha de Hamas Meinan. We need. It's not just any kind of Russia. It's not like just a misdemeanor kind of thing. It has to be a felony. It has to be a theft for him to be disqualified. Because that pasuk says, aid Hamas, a violent or a robbing witness is the one that's no good. Meisvei. So they ask the question of Rava. Al tashas Rasha aid, al tashas Hamas aid. Elu gazlonim molim b'shvuos. So by using both the words aid and Hamas, it refers to thieves and people who take false oaths. Now, by using the general word false oaths, does it not both mean a a a pointless a pointless oath, and also an oath that causes someone to lose money? So in other words, if I take an oath that a cow is a pig, well, that doesn't hurt anybody, but it's false. So that's a shuas shav. If I say I never borrowed that thing from you, and really I did, that's a shvua that cost somebody money. So, doesn't that indicate that by including Shuas Shav in this pasuk, Al Tashas Rasha Lios Et Hamas, doesn't that indicate that even if it's not a monetary thing, even if it's some other reason, such as lahachis, that you would still be disqualified? Of course, it's low. They're both talking about your assumption that a false shvua makes you disqualified. It really only refers to to oaths which cost people money. But why does it use the plural? Shvos alma. It means it's a colloquial use of the plural. We shouldn't make too much of it. Meisvei, now they ask on Abaye, Al Tashis Rasha Eid, Al Tashis Hamas Eid, by using the both words, Hamas and Rasha. Elu Gazlonim Malvi Ribios. Another Brisa says this is talking about thieves and people who lend with interest. So aren't these both for financial gain? So doesn't that indicate that Abaye is wrong, that oaths that are not for financial gain, that are just lahachis, should not be included in this prohibition of in this disqualification of witnesses? So it's Tufta the Abaye. Yes, it's Tufta. It is a good question on Abaye, which is interesting because we just said that this is one of the cases where we do rule like Abaye, but even though he is tripped up by this brisa, we still accept what Abaye says, which is that you look back and disqualify the witness retroactively to the time that he gave his testimony, his that was became subject to Zom. Name a Tanai. Maybe this machlokas between Abai and Rava is like a Tanaic argument. Ezo and Pasal Kula. The Brisa says an Eid Zomim is invalid for testimony of anything, any kind of testimony in the Torah. Do Reb Meir. Um, but Rabbi Yossi Omer, but Rabbi Yossi says, but Medvarim Amurim, when do we disqualify them? Shehuz Amadin and Nefashos. Only if the case that he was be found to be an Eid Zomim for was a capital case. Aval Huz Amadin Mamonos, but if it was just a monetary case, Kasher Adin and Nefashos. So okay, he can't be a witness for other monetary cases, but if he's a witness in the capital case, he's still qualified, according to Rabbi Yossi. So now let's try to align this with Abaye and Rava. Name Abaye Korb Meir for Rava Korb Yossi. Maybe we'll say that Abaye, who says you look back, holds like Rabbi Meir, that says it's a blanket thing. It's like if you're an aid zomim, um, you can't be an aid for anything else ever. The Rav or Rav Yossi, who says you don't look back, he holds like Rav Yossi that yeah, you can that you're not completely disqualified. How so? Abaye Rav Meir, Diamar Mino Mikul Chumra. Abaye holds like Rav Meir, who says that if you, but he's more of a maximalist. He's like saying that if you did a lesser sin, then you are still suspect of committing a worse sin, a more serious one. For Rava Damar Rav Yossi, and Rava agrees with Rav Yossi, that we say that no, that if you did a capital, if you did a major thing wrong, then we don't trust you for major things, but we still could trust you for minor things. And Mikul Chumar alone, So the Gemara answers love. No, it's not so. I'll leave it. Rabbi Yossi, everybody, according to Rabbi Yossi, everybody agrees that if you sin lahachis, then you can testify. For a one second. Leave it to Rabbi Yossi. According to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi, who differentiates between, you might be trustworthy in some sins even if you're not in others. Everybody agrees that Rabbi Yossi would hold that if you eat, if you do if you eat non-kosher meat, lahachis, then we can say, okay, you could still testify because that is nothing to do with Dine Mamonos. Kipliga Rabbi Meir. But when they're arguing about, in the opinion of Rabbi Meir, if you hold like Rabbi Meir, that says across the board, if you're a sinner, you're a sinner. Abai Rabbi Meir, Abai would agree with Rabbi Meir. And Rava, Adkan Lokama Rabbi Meir, Hastamel Gabi Zomim de Mamon. That Rabbi Meir would only say that about aiding zomim for monetary cases, but he wouldn't say it because that he is sinning against both people and against God. But eating nevelos, eating non-kosher meat, you're not doing anything. You're not affecting anybody else. It's just between you and God. It is he's being wicked towards God, but not towards other people. Look, even Rameir would say that we don't suspect him of more serious sin of false testimony. And now we say the halacha is like Abaye, as we said before. So Gemara says, wait a minute, but we tripped Abaye up before. Hahi Rabbi Yossi, that was following Rabbi Yossi. So, but we don't necessarily hold like Rabbi Yossi. We can hold like Rabbi Meir. So, so since Rav Meir, you could say that if you hold like Rabbi Yossi, Abaye is wrong. But if you hold like Rabbi Meir, then Abaye could be right. And we do a rule like Abaye. But to having Nami Rabbi Yossi, where it says, well, even if we hold like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi, like Rabbi Yossi, why are you saying we hold like Rabbi Meir? The rule is if Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi argue, we usually come down on the side of Rabbi Yossi. So then, if we're agreeing with Rabbi Yossi, and within Rabbi Yossi's opinion, Abaye's position is not supportable, why do we rule like Abaye? Shani Dasasam Latana Rabbi Meir. In this case, the it's not that we don't. It's not directly attributed to Rabbi Meir. We assume it's Rabbi Meir because the Mishnah Rabbi Meir, because an anonymous voice in the Mishnah is assumed to be Rabbi Meir. So in that case, if the Mishnah presents it that way, it could be that we rule like Rabbi Meir. When do we say we rule like Rabbi Yossi against Rabbi Meir? Only if it's Rabbi Meir says this and Rabbi Yossi says that. But if the Mishnah presents it as the anonymous voice, um, then we could rule that way. Where do we have that? But the quote that we had was Rabbi Meir versus Rabbi Yossi. So where do we have this argument, this machlokas, formulated as the anonymous voice for Rabbi Meir? Kiha de Bar Chama katal nafsha. There was the case of Bar Chama who was accused of killing someone. Amalei Reish Galusa l'Rav Abba Riako. So the Reish Galusa, the exilarch, said to Rav Abba, "Poke ayin bo. Go and check it out. Like, what's the story here? Did he or didn't he?" If it turns out that Bar Chama was a murderer, lichayuhu le'ene, then put out his eyes, which there's it. I mean, there are Rishonim who interpret, or Achronim maybe that interpret this metaphorically, but it sounds like, maybe we don't have the authority to execute him, but we have the authority to punish him by blinding him. So Asu Tresade, Asidu Bey Divade Katal. So two witnesses come and they testify that he was a murderer. Azal Iu, I say Tresade, Asidu Bey Bechad Mehanach. So Bar Chama finds two other witnesses who disqualifies one of the witnesses against him. Chana Bar Kamai Didi Ganav Kaba Dechushla. One of Bar Chama's witnesses said, I witnessed this guy steal a kav of barley. Kata de Bortia. And the other says, I saw him stealing, a spear handle. Okay, so like they're somewhat different testimonies, but they're both saying that he was busy, that he was, that he was a thief, and so couldn't be a witness, right? Amar, so Rav Abba said, my datach, Kreb Meir. So what are you thinking? You're holding like Reb Meir, right? That you want to disqualify this person as a witness in your capital case, right? By saying that he was guilty of a monetary crime of stealing. So Reb Meir, Reb Yossi, Alachak Reb Yossi. Then I would have to go like Reb Yossi and not like Reb Meir. Reb Yossi Ha'amar Huzam Bedine Mamanos Kasher Bedine Nefashos, and Rav Yossi says that even if the guy is a thief, he's still valid as a witness in the capital case. So Rav Papi said, that's what we were trying to demonstrate before. We're not necessarily going to rule like Rav Yossi because Rav Meir's position was put out as an anonymous voice. In this case, we have a Mishnah that presents Reb Meir's view as anonymous, and therefore we can rule like Reb Meir, and therefore we can say that this witness is not valid. Mimai. Where do we get the idea that this anonymous Tana is Reb Meir? Maybe you're talking about the Mishnah that says anonymously anybody who can judge Dina Nefashos, a capital case, can judge a monetary case. Mane, whose opinion is that? No, it can't be Rabbi Yossi, because what about the case of the Eid Zomim, who can't testify and certainly can't be a judge in a civil case? In a capital case, if he was convicted in the civil case, the kashal dinei nefashos, upasul dinei monos. Elav Reb Meir he. So this anonymous Mishnah must be Reb Meir's view. Where it says, "Mimai, how do you know you're talking about?" It's just talking about people who are disqualified from judging. It doesn't say disqualified because they're wicked, because they're, because they've committed crimes. There could be other reasons. You could be a relative, for example. Maybe we're talking about not you're disqualified for because you're not reliable. You're just, or not because you're a criminal. You're disqualified because you're a relative of, as we're going to see in the next Mishnah, all kinds of relatives that can't be witnesses for your case. If you don't say that, Sefer the Ketani Yesh Roy Lodin Din Imamos Vein Roy Lodin Din Nefashos. The rest of that Mishnah we're talking about that says there are people who could be monetary witnesses or who could judge monetary cases, but not capital cases. Am I in a right? Why not? To eat some bedina nefashos. If you want to say it's because he became an ezomim in the capital case, so then can he judge in a civil case? No. Everybody would agree you can't do that. We must be talking about why are you disqualified? Because you're a relative. The same goes for the Resha. So that's not a good Mishnah to say that is Rabbi Meir's opinion. Could be talking about something else altogether. Maybe this is the place. It's not. Here's a Mishnah. Here are the people who are not valid witnesses. Hamasachi Bukubia, a gambler, Malvi Barivis, someone who lends with interest, Mafriche Yonim, someone who runs pigeon races, Vesochre Shvis, people who make their living or who trade in Shemitah produce, Va'avadim, and slaves. All of these people are not good witnesses. Klal, this is the rule. Kol Edus She'ena Ishak Sherala, any testimony that a woman can't give, Afhain and Sherila. These people also can't give that testimony. Now, who's the author of this Mishnah? Rabbi Yossi, Faika, Edus Medina Fashos. According to Rabbi Yossi, you would also have to include um, uh, testimony in a capital case. Sheina Ishak Sherala. A woman can't give testimony in a capital case. Veheng Sherila, but these people can. So by the fact that we leave that out of this list, Lover Mary, it must be Reb Meir who is the author of this Mishnah, and it is an anonymous Mishnah, and therefore we can follow it rather than following Rabbi Yossi. So anyway, back to the case of Bar Chama, come Bar Chama. So because we rule like Rabbi Yossi here, we can let Bar Chama off the hook. Because the witnesses against him were disqualified because they were shown to be thieves. So come Bar Chama gets up, Nashke Akare, he kissed Rav Papi's foot, V'kable lecharge dechule shnei, and he took the responsibility of taking up his poll tax. Like he rewarded him by for his ruling by now it's a little unclear if he paid the poll tax or if he intervened so that he wouldn't be subject to a poll tax. Maybe he had some kind of influence or ability to absolve someone of their taxes. Which sounds a little unethical too, by the way, right? Like I would have thought that you can't do favors to the judge who let you off, right? But here it wasn't really the judge; it was the scholar who the judge's ruling relied on. So maybe it's a little more indirect. Okay, so next Mishnah. Now we are
So
dealing
did
with.
so the witnesses were disqualified.
The witnesses were disqualified, yes.
Right. So was then but who was he? Was he punished for the murder
Bar
that he
Chama?
committed?
The guy who was being tried for murder?
What was his name?
Murder? No, he's off the hook because there are no witnesses.
Those were the witnesses he brought to support himself, right?
No, the witnesses he brought to support him said that the witnesses against me were thieves, and they can't. Their testimony is invalid.
Oh,
So there was testimony against him, but it was disqualified because we ruled like Rabbi Yossi that because they were thieves, they're not even valid eligible witnesses for a capital case. Whereas if we had ruled like Rav Meir, we would have said, okay, they're thieves, but we can't trust them when it comes to money, but we can trust them
Right.
when it comes to something more serious like a capital case.
Oh,
That
so those,
they wouldn't be so wicked as to testify falsely.
so those, okay. Those witnesses were uh somebody else brought witnesses against him. Those witnesses were thieves, right? So they
Yeah.
were supposedly testify against him. Now you mentioned that some people held that poking out his eyes was equivalent, right? That some people didn't hold, right? That would
Right. Well, it's a capital case in the sense that he's being tried for murder. So
so
true,
so
he
so
will not be put to death. So maybe capital case is not the best translation. You're right. I that was not a good translation, but it was a case about murder. So yeah, he was not subject to the death penalty, but it was a case about murder. So yes, thank you for the correction.
see Rashi says there. I looked at Rashi says that the Yanakruet enough they should go the batnu mitat beitin that a beitin that was abolished by that time. So then it wasn't even an issue. V'hai kansa ka avdin beit. So
Yeah, so in other words, the Jewish courts were no longer authorized to carry out capital punishment, but they still existed and still had the power to exact this, physical punishment, corporal punishment. Or in this case, they were planning to blind him.
right. Onshin shalom min Torah.
Yeah, so these were, I mean, that is not a punishment prescribed by the Torah, right? There's no such thing as if you kill somebody, we blind you, right?
Right.
That's not a Torah law. But I encountered somewhere that the Reish Galusa here is acting in the capacity of a melech, right? He's like the political leader, and he has that authority to impose whatever punishment he chooses. And we find the rabbis took this upon themselves also when it comes to things like, if you have someone that did it, but due to the rules of evidence, you can't convict him, then there are cases where you basically put him in solitary until he dies. So you don't actively kill him, but right, but the rabbis and in this case maybe it's the king's authority or similar to the king's authority can enact their own punishments.
And then Rashi goes on. He says, "Vayeshom yitnu mimenu vayitnu liyorshin." That would be. It seems like there's another type of punishment they could do.
Yeah, Yeshomrim. So he's sorry, which Rashi is this?
This is where Rashi said, "Likayunu le'enei."
Excuse me. Um, yeah, I
Likayu.
see, I see it. Yesharim Yitlu Mamono. Yeah, so here Rashi is saying that maybe it's a metaphorical blinding, right? Not that they're actually going to put out his eyes, but they'll find him. Yitlu Mamono, the Yitnu Yarshin. They'll find him and it's like blood money, right? They'll give the money to the murder victim's estate. And Yeshomrim, another version,
There's another
Shamta,
one.
Shamta. Some say we'll put him in Chayrim. But Rashi says Rishon. Really, I think it's like literal that they're going to blind him. She's just quoting two other interpretations of what it
Right.
means to blind the guy. So,
That's
gets you out of the problem of what authority do they have to blind him. So if you interpret it metaphorically, it's fine. They're not actually blinding him; they're confiscating his money. Well, that the court certainly has authority to do, or put him in chayrim. That the court certainly has authority to do.
but ultimately Rashi says Varishon Ikar.
Yeah, the literal translation interpretation is what Rashi thinks is correct.
I don't know, unusual. Comes up with so many possibilities, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is a little disturbing, right? That that they were going to blind the guy as a punishment. Where do you get that from?
Well, that's a good question too.
Yeah. Okay. Next Mishnah, Eloin Akrovim. These are relatives that are disqualified from testifying. Achiv, your brother. By you I mean the person who's involved in the case. V'achi aviv, and your uncle, your father's brother, v'achimo, your uncle on your mother's side. Uvalachoso, your brother-in-law, your sister's husband. Uvalachos aviv, and your father's sister's husband, your father's brother-in-law. Ubalachosimo, and your mother's brother-in-law. Ubalimo, your mother's husband, in other words, your stepfather. V'chamiv, and his father-in-law. V'giso, and his brother-in-law. Hein uvneim v'chasneim, and so all of these people and their children, their sons, and their sons-in-law, these are all invalid to testify in your case. V'chargo levado, but if it's a stepson, just the stepson is. If there's a stepson, only the stepson is invalid as a witness, but not the stepson's son or son-in-law. That those people are valid. Rabbi Yossi, Zu Mishnah Rabbi Akiva. That's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Ava Mishnah Rishona, but in the originally Mishnah Rishona, an earlier Mishnah, Dodo uven Dodo v'chol haroy yarsho. Your uncle, your uncle's son, and not only that, but any descendant. And how do you define a descendant? Someone who would inherit from you, all the generations down. His son, grandson, great grandson can't testify against you, or in your case. If anyone who's related to you, so some of these relations are due to marriage. What if the marriage dissolved? So if they're related to you at the time of either the time of the event they're testifying about, or the time that that you're doing the testifying, that's when you're disqualified for both of those. But if you were related and then due to a dissolved marriage, you're no longer related, then you're a valid witness. Rav Yehuda Omer, "Afilu mesa bito v'yesh lo banim mimena harei zakarov." Even if your daughter died, but she had children, the son-in-law is still connected to you, right? The son-in-law of your son-in-law through your deceased daughter, if there are children, then he's still related to you. So ha'ohev v'asone, also who's disqualified if the good friend or an enemy. Ohev zeh What do you mean a friend? Somebody who would be shushvin is like a groomsman at your wedding. Sone, that's how you define like how close a friend. Um, um, and Rashi says that during the 7 days of the Shavuot brachos, that's when he's disqualified. Like, because how do you know who's worthy to be a shushvin? If he is actually the shushvin at the time of the event or the time of the testimony, during the week of Shavuot brachos, that's when he's disqualified. Sonei, what's an enemy?
When it says b'mei chupato, you mean that the entire week, the 7 days, or just a day or two?
Yeah.
Rashi says b'mei
Not sure.
chupato.
Yeah, Bimei Chupaso. Yeah, that is a little unclear. I don't know exactly what it means. I'm assuming it's like the week of Shavuot brachos, but
It
not
could
sure.
be just the day or two surrounding the chuppah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little unclear. Agreed. Sone, what's an enemy? Choshelo diber imo shlosha yamim be'eva. Um, someone who gives you the silent treatment for at least 3 days because he's angry at you. That's an enemy. Amru, said to him, "Nechshu Yisrael al kach." No, we're not just because someone dislikes you doesn't mean we're gonna think that he'd be dishonest. So. Um, So this is, in other words, this is not sufficient to consider someone an enemy. Just because somebody's not speaking to you, that doesn't indicate that he is an enemy to the extent that he can't that he can't testify about you. Um, Rashi says, "Lo nashdu yisrael lakach l'hayit sheker mishum eva v'yava v'dafka beidus plige aval bedin modele rabbanon the apostle lo ladun." But 1 second. No. So 1 second.
He's talking Eva
Oh,
Va'ava in
right. Yeah,
general.
the Rashi says that. Yeah, you can't be you. Okay, yeah, so as a witness, you. This is the Oev and Sone thing is applies to witnesses, but not to judges, right? We don't. 1 second. Yeah, we could say when the rabbis say, no, people aren't going to be so petty, that's about witnesses. But about a judge, you can't say that. You would say that you have to be more careful about a judge who you're going to allow to be a judge, and then you would be more stringent about, yeah, if they're too close or too estranged, you can't be a judge, even if you could be a witness.
לא מצי להפוכי בזכויותיהם. That's what he's concerned with the judges.
Um,
The last few words of
The
Rashi.
Kavan Desanile, because since he hates him, V'lo motzi lahafuche b'schusei, he won't like um lahafuche b'schusei, he won't lean towards your
Oh,
innocence.
I was thinking to turn it upside down, to turn against you, but till you say lean, that makes more sense then.
Okay, yeah. Now, Minani like Mara wants to know, where do you get what's the source for not having witnesses, not having relatives as witnesses? The Torah Rabban, the rabbis in Brisa. Lo yumsu avos albanim. Torah says fathers shall not be put to death on account of the sons. Matom lomer. Why does the Torah say this? Im lamish lo yumsu avos bi'avon banim banim bavon avos. If it's to tell you literally that you can't punish fathers for the sin of sons and vice versa. Harik Ranamar, Ish Bechato Yumasu. Another source tells you that. Person only is put to death for his own sin. So obviously not for your father's sin or your son's sin. Ella, what it means is not that you can't put the fathers to death for the sins of the sons. It means you can't put the fathers to death by the testimony of the sons. So this gives you the idea where a son can't be a witness against his father. Ubanim and sons can't be put to death, not for the sins of their fathers, but it means by the testimony of their fathers. So Gemara says, "Uvani v'avon avos lo." But don't we see that sons are put to death for their father's sins? Vaksiv poked avon avos albanim. Another pasuk says God will bring the sins of the fathers, will visit the sins of the fathers on the sons. So what about that? Well, answer is Hasam Kishaochim Masya was saying be a day, and that's when they maintain the wicked behavior of their fathers. Kidutanya, as we have a brisa, v'yaf bavonos avosam itam yimaku. In the klala, the Torah says in the sins of their fathers they will be wiped out as well. Kishaochim Masya was saying be a day. It means when they are continuing the sins of the fathers. You say that. Oh, I know Well, how do you know? Maybe the Torah, the pasuk doesn't say that specifically, right? Maybe it's even if they're innocent of their father's practices. Because when it then tells you that a man dies only for his own sins, now I understand. But that's how you resolve the contradiction. The law. So wait a second. So you're telling me that you can't be killed for the sins of somebody else? Vaksiv kashlu ish b'achiv. Um, a person will stumble over his brother, which the Bryce explains, Ish ba'avon achiv. You'll be tripped up with your friend's sin. That teaches you that everyone is responsible for everybody else. In other words, somebody else's sin is not just his sin; it's also your sin. So you do die because of other. You do get punished because of other people's sins. Whereas says Hasam, no, it's only when you have the ability to to prevent somebody else from sinning. Then you're responsible. But if not, you're not responsible for someone else's sin. Okay, so we have a pasuk that tells us about fathers and sons. They can't testify about each other. Certainly, um, uh, here it seems to mean brothers. If they have the same father, they can't testify about each other. Banim lebanim minalan. But how do you know that banim lebanim? If two fathers have sons, so in other words, first cousins, where do you get that? How do you know that they can't testify about each other? Imkain lichtav kra lo yimsu avos albain. Then it wouldn't use the plural, avos albanim. Avos albanim, it indicates first cousins as well. My banim, afilu banim ladade, even if they're sons, like sons of different fathers, but of fathers who are disqualified.
They're
Okay, so
brothers.
tomorrow,
They're cousins. Then
yeah, yeah. So tomorrow we will continue. The Gemara is going to try to find a pasuk. Strangely enough, I think a pasuk for each of the cases enumerated in the Mishnah of relatives that are not qualified to testify. The Gemara is going to want a pasuk for each one of those, and we'll see that tomorrow.
is the Gemara going to talk more about the Ben Chorgo? Because Rashi is it's a long Rashi about that in the Mishnah. Rashi
Yes.
goes into a long arichuta it's just we went by too fast for me to medayek that, but he so what
So I don't know the answer to your question. If the Gemara will discuss Fargo, I haven't gotten that far ahead, so I guess we'll find out. Um, Rashi seems to be. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, this is going to be a little like Yavamos, I gotta say.
yeah, and I glanced at it a little bit, and he said this one is the Baal of the emo, and why we learn the emishim. He says goes through a whole. It's too much to cover in 20 seconds. I mean.
Okay, I'll pick it up tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.